look at your talk on emotional well-being in esports, the comparative study. Hello, Heather, can you hear me? Your audio is extremely low. Can you turn your mic up by any chance? Okay, we'll just go quickly to an intermission to see if we can sort this out. Thank you. Just give me.
Can you hear me, everybody? Okay, so my name is Heather, and I am the head of safeguarding for the S.E.A Dragons Esports team. So my role is to make sure that all of the players are completely safe and happy and supported while they are competing. So if there's ever any issues with racism or abuse or even small things like banter that can turn quite toxic, those reports come to me, and I can then put those reports further up in places such as Esports Wales to make sure that everyone is protected. So my study is a comparative study of professional and amateur players looking at adapted clinical assessment tools. This is a topic that is very important to me. I am a first-year counselling psychology student at the University of South Wales, so I am very interested in mental health and counselling, and in the last year or so, esports in particular. So my research began thinking about what is there lacking in esports. And what I found through my research is that emotional well-being and counselling seems to have only been studied in traditional sports. So as you can see here, there are global guidelines in place for traditional sports such as football and baseball. And one big limitation of the very limited esports research there is that it only focuses on things like anxiety. And through my research, I have noticed that things like depression and sometimes symptoms of OCD are very common in professional and semi-professional esports players. So the research that there is into esports is framed around risks. So impacts on the players' welfare, such as their sleep, their focus, and their education. And because esports is such a new thing, I guess, is that there's very limited mental health supports unless you are a very, very professional player earning tens and thousands of pounds playing video games. So overall, why this matters is that esports players experience the same risks and mental health struggles as traditional athletes. So my hope is that we can improve safeguarding in esports and provide that much needed mental health support to esports players. So I'm just going to look into now some of the previous research there is into traditional sports and esports. So in traditional sport, there is lots of strong evidence to suggest that mental health is a lasting factor of being a competitive athlete, as I've cited Rice and Moses here. You can see that things like anxiety, depression, decision making, and motivation can all be impacted by the pressures that competitive sport has. And in traditional sports such as football, there are structured safeguarding practices and guidelines, which is lacking in esports. But some of the research into esports has shown that there are risks to gaming competitively, things like gaming addiction, sleep disruption, and reduction in success in education, particularly those who are aged between 15 and 18, who are still in full-time school, college, and education. There are some unique stressors, however, that seem to exist more prominently in esports, such as the irregular training schedules and the screen exposure. Because obviously this career, this occupation is very highly based online, which can present its own risks in being quite toxic. You can't see the person behind the screen a lot of the time, which is where my research comes in. And I'd like to make sure that there are structured reporting processes and guidelines to keep players safe. So on that, there are a few safeguarding and wellbeing frameworks that already exist and some early interventions. But there is still very limited research into esports, and there is such a lack of support for those who are competing, and it can feel quite isolating, which is a topic I found quite continuously in my research, which we'll have a start looking at now. So my research was going to be a questionnaire-based study. So obviously I'm the head of safeguarding for S.E.A Dragons Esports, and our main communication is through Discord. So I thought it right to send my questionnaire that I have created through Discord to gather the players, gather their insights, and figure out what some of the triggers can be and what their mental health is in the core. So overall, my methodology was to recruit as many players as I could, ranging from casual players who may just play in their bedrooms and have no interest in competing, may only play solo sports, all the way up into professional players who are earning tens and thousands of pounds. They are working in Europe, globally, competing for esports. And those recruitments would be gathered through Discord. So my methodology was a questionnaire that I had devised myself, starting with hold on, let me click onto the next slide. Here we go. Starting with, of course, informed consent, making sure that was obtained at the beginning of the study, and then a section about the demographics. I looked into the gender, age, and ages of the participants. I looked into whether they were part of a team, where in the world they are from, and yeah, things like that. And then I moved on to looking at esports specific questions. This was what I was particularly interested in. Things like their sleep schedules, how many hours of sleep they get each night, their training schedules, whether they feel supported, maybe the people they felt supported them the most during their time in esports. And finally, I adapted 3 clinical measures, which was the GAD7, the PHQ-9, and the Core-AM. These are emotional well-being clinical assessment tools. So they are used in diagnostics and treating mental illnesses. So I adapted them into my questionnaire to gain the mental health scores from each participant, and I could see how that linked to their role and rank in esports. So for my study, I gained 27 participants. I was aiming for a few more, but it proved quite difficult because my questionnaire was quite long. But that's something I can work on in the future and adapt my research. So I had 27 participants who were all over the age of 18. Because of these mental health questionnaires, I wanted to make sure that everybody was safe and there would be no or as limited psychological harm as I could manage. So, on to my results. So, my results were quite conclusive. I first looked at the demographics. What was unusual for me was that there was a quite high transgender population, which, linking in to the emotional well-being, they could have some of their own struggles as well in esports, especially with things like gender identity, which is a massive form of abuse in esports and particularly VC chats. And overall, my graph shows and my results show that those who are semi-professionals have the highest ratings in their mental health questionnaires. So they have the poorest mental health out of all of the people I've studied. And some of the reasons behind that I see is that in professional esports, there is a larger amount of well-being support. So they have someone on staff, they have counsellors, they have that more structured support. Whereas in semi-professional, they are being worked as hard as people who are considered professionals. They have longer training hours, they earn way less money and have way less support, which showed in their mental health questionnaires. And one of the main findings for me was that their anxiety and depression scores spiked. So I had quite a large amount of semi-professionals. They were my largest demographic of participants, and their mental health scores were shockingly different to the rest of the players. So that's really hammered home to me that these are the participants that are really struggling the most. And yeah, I think it's quite clear to see there that those who are casual players have the lowest mental health scores, so they have the lowest levels of anxiety and depression. And going up to from amateur to semi-professional, there is a vast difference in their mental health. So overall, it does show that the semi-professionals, although they are not the most competitive, have the poorest mental health. Okay, so I then had a more structured analysis of my study. So this graph shows the average mental health scores by the ranked levels. So the semi-professional players showed the higher because they had the highest amount of stress, the highest amount of pressure, and the lowest amount of support, showed the highest anxiety scores compared to amateurs. Those who were amateurs or casual players showed better overall well-being with lower scores on the 3 mental health questionnaires. As I was saying, the professional and semi-professional players also reported symptoms such as isolation, panic, not being able to sleep, not being able to stop worrying, not being able to balance their work-life balance, having no social life, and that's all linked in with their extremely high training hours, their lack of sleep, their lack of mental health support. And one thing that really stuck out to me is the careers aspect. So many of the semi-professionals had such an intense worry that they would not make it as a professional esports player. So they noted that their anxiety is high because of that. Because although they're trying so hard, they've got these extreme hours, these extreme pressures on them, they feel like they're not getting anywhere, which really reflected in their mental health scores. Okay, so this is a structure that I have devised myself that sort of looks vastly at what support systems should look like for esports players, particularly psychological testing, which are those 3 questionnaires that I used in my study to show the mental well-being of your players at every point, maybe before big competitions or even when training's really harsh. And this allows for higher levels of safeguarding, higher support systems, and overall better performance of the players. And finally, just to sum up everything that I've been saying, mental health clearly impacts performance, and support frameworks in esports are urgently needed. I think that's everything. Please let me know if you have any questions. I don't know if I've rushed through that a bit quick, but thank you for listening.
Hello, Heather. I hope you can hear me okay.
Sorry, I still can't hear you.
Can you?
Hold
You
on.
may need to make sure that I'm available on audio on
Oh,
the
there you
next...
go. I can hear you now.
Perfect, great, that's fantastic. Fantastic presentation, really interesting data. I haven't got many questions in terms of the chat, but
That's okay.
Milan Prepare has actually asked personally if he can have your presentation to look over a little bit later on. If you could get in contact with him on Twitch, that would be fantastic.
Oh, yes, of
but
course,
there's some
no
really cool
worries.
data there, and I think the safeguarding that we have tier 3 or amateur and players who are looking to break into that scene is just not there at the moment, and it's really clear that you've highlighted that really well. So thank you.
Amazing, thank you.
One thing that I will say is, do you think we could get, we'll probably have a discussion at some point to see if we can do some more safeguard and focus things in relation to that, because I personally think it's a really useful and underrepresented area within esports. So I'm really impressed with you, and as you're still I think you're an undergraduate student, aren't you? Or are you a master's student?
I am, yeah, undergraduate.
Yeah, it's phenomenal how much depth you were able to get with that as well. So that's really impressive, and you should be really proud of yourself.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
So I'm going to pass over to a quick intermission before we have Tom Brock, which is our last presenter for the EMEA region. We will have S-Band's video afterwards, and I have a few things to go through and a few last statements myself I want to make at the end of the talk. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.